Contrary to popular belief, Adam Lambert didn't merely disappear after leaving the American Idol stage. His entire career was subtly transformed by a chain reaction of choices, scandals, and rebrandings that ensued. His path has been anything but ordinary, taking him from being the subject of public scrutiny due to his identity to performing on the largest stages in the world with one of the most renowned bands in rock history. It seems like he had finally found his footing in that capacity, but then he pulled another fast one that nobody saw coming. Pressure became a byproduct of the night's fame. There was more to Adam Lambert than meets the eye when he took the American Idol stage. His command of the stage, dramatic delivery, and other stage-stealing qualities made him stand out like a sore thumb rather than a mere rival. His groundbreaking glam rock performances, which drew inspiration from David Bowie and Freddie Mercury, continued week after week. Many viewers already thought he had won going into the finals. His unexpected placement in second place stunned viewers and commentators alike and prompted many to wonder if factors other than his natural abilities had a role in the competition. When intimate images of Lambert kissing his ex-boyfriend appeared during the competition, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the question. It was a very controversial move at a time when out gay singers were still having a hard time breaking into mainstream pop. Publicly, conservative media personalities blasted him, and big magazines focused on his sexuality instead of his performances. Lambert, who had previously come out in his private life, was thrust into a highly publicized version of that process on one of the country's most prominent television networks. Lack of a defined next step just served to further complicate matters. To the best of our knowledge, no openly homosexual male performers had achieved that kind of success in mainstream pop. Lambert later acknowledged that the fact that he lacked a roadmap for navigating the issue came to him rapidly. He realized that people were talking more about him than his music, which he found extremely annoying since it took focus off of the music he had worked on for so long. Lambert, seeking to reclaim control of the story, acknowledged his sexuality in a major magazine interview after the program finished. The reaction was more nuanced. Others said they were deceived, while others said he should have dealt with it sooner. Meanwhile, he was under pressure from inside the industry to change his image. Even the smallest issues became flashpoints when he was just starting out. Concerns about his image's acceptability in more conservative retail venues prompted the removal of a reference to a male relationship from one of his tracks. Lambert nonetheless decided against pulling back entirely in the face of all this. In order to further his profession, he took a strategic decision to maintain visibility at the expense of other aspects. That decision shaped his post-Idol experience in its early stages. He didn't hide from the spotlight after the issue died down. Instead, he released his debut album, which did well in the charts and yielded a song that was nominated for a Grammy. That he could turn attention into achievement, even when pushed, was a sign of his resilience. The true game changer, though, wasn't his music, but rather a single performance that catapulted him into the middle of a heated national controversy. The scandal that almost sealed all opportunities. Adam Lambert was not taken lightly when the time came to test his status in the profession. It occurred during a live performance supposed to introduce his new period on stage at an awards show, in front of millions of spectators. Rather, it set off a chain reaction that extended much beyond the realm of music. As part of her act, Lambert shared a quick kiss with a male band member during that presentation. It may have gone unnoticed in other settings, but it sparked a heated debate on a national scale. His scheduled appearance on a major morning show was abruptly cancelled by the network within hours of receiving complaints and demands for consequences from advocacy groups. What happened next confirmed what Lambert had suspected all along throughout his stint on TV, a double standard. It was analyzed, repeated, and even cheered when comparable moments starring female performers had shown in prior years. The response was very different for him. There were instances where the performance was edited out of certain broadcasts, and when his performance was compared to others in pop culture history, it was the only one that appeared blurry. Because of the contrast, the situation could not be disregarded. The focus shifted from a singular performance to the varied ways in which the industry and media covered acts of self-expression. Simultaneously, the commercial sector of the music industry started to fight back harder. His image's potential overexposure to the general public was a topic of continuous discussion. His visual flair and outspoken sexuality raised concerns among some executives who worried it may hurt his radio and retail careers. Some of his inventive singles that drew on his glam influences were nevertheless turned down because they were too ostentatious. It was an unambiguous message. You might get in trouble if you dared to violate certain lines. Lambert was forced to make a choice at such a young stage in his career that few musicians ever face. He had two options: either completely resist and miss out on chances, or strategically adjust while retaining as much of his identity as possible. Not because he was in agreement with the constraints, but because he could see the forest for the trees, he opted for the second route. He characterized this time as a balancing act between being authentic and making sure his career could keep growing, instead of stagnate. His next significant project was influenced by that delicate balancing act. He moved for a more subdued and refined sound rather than amplifying shock value or controversy. His subsequent album was notably more subdued in tone, albeit it retained some of his signature sounds. This had its uses, even though others thought it was a setback. At a time when many doors were beginning to close, it helped him solidify his standing in the industry. Lambert was aware that something was amiss even as he modified his strategy. There were still expectations in his workplace that made it hard for him to be himself. A place free of such limitations, where he could give his all without fear of reprimand, was what he needed. A chance encounter came his way in a manner that altered his career's course irrevocably, linking him to a legacy greater than anything he had encountered before. The surprising alliance that changed the game. There was no new producer or label approach that Adam Lambert had been hoping would bring about the change she had been seeking. It was born out of a partnership that, at first glance, appeared formidable. He initially performed on stage alongside Brian May and Roger Taylor during a televised event, singing one of Queen's most famous songs. Not only was he a talented singer, but he also understood the band's signature theatricality, which made him stand out. Following that performance, other invitations came in, and what was initially just a one-off appearance gradually turned into something much bigger. With the partnership expanding, Lambert was thrust into a position fraught with high expectations. Any effort to rediscover Freddie Mercury's legacy was fraught with peril because he was more than simply a vocalist, he was a defining character in rock history. Lambert has always been forthright about his intentions. He is not attempting to unseat Mercury. Rather, he viewed his function as that of an interpreter, someone who could offer fresh insight into the subject matter while paying homage to its historical context. Because of that difference, audiences were able to accept him when they otherwise might not have. Something happened to Lambert while touring with Queen that he hadn't truly felt while performing alone. Full artistic liberty when performing. There were no discussions about whether his style needed to be toned down or if he was too much in that setting. Things that were once considered weaknesses in the sector are now seen as positives. Instincts for the stage, a wide vocal range, and the capacity to switch between dramatic and personal moments were all in harmony with the band's character. What began as a cautious trial blossomed into a partnership that would continue for over a decade. The magnitude of those tours had a quantifiable impact on Lambert's career. As he performed in stadiums and arenas all around the globe, he was able to connect with fans that had grown much beyond his American Idol fan base. In addition to introducing Queen's music to a new audience, the partnership accomplished something that very few musicians can: it bridged generations. The subsequent publication of a live album commemorating that event demonstrated how Lambert had become an integral part of the band's history without becoming its dominant figure. Concurrently, this collaboration offered something more intimate. Lambert finally discovered a location where he could be himself after years of fighting against limitations imposed by his job. He said he was now free from the constraints of worrying about what people would or would not like. Alternatively, he could be himself on stage and not have to hide his identity or his acting style. He reached a turning point in his career and his understanding of his duty as an artist when he felt accepted. Having done well with Queen, though, a new question arose. Some wondered if this job would take precedence over his own as the trips progressed and the partnership deepened. That was a concept that Lambert strongly opposed. he maintained that the two routes could coexist. He demonstrated that he could honor a history without sacrificing his own creative vision by keeping his collaboration with Queen at the core of his career even as he expanded his solo work. Going back on stage altered his reputation once more. Adam Lambert did not rush to launch another massive musical project after Queen's world tour wound down following years of non-stop concerts. However, he veered in a different route, one that had always been a part of his personality even before he became famous, much to the surprise of many casual followers. He returned to the stage. Neither was this an experiment meant to be done on the side. It was an intentional decision that got him back to where he started, something he had neglected since American Idol altered his trajectory. Lambert's choice to participate in a large-scale theatrical play was his first foray back into the performing arts since his formative years in Los Angeles, where he worked on his skill before breaking into the music industry. There was some danger in his reappearance since it put him in a new kind of limelight. He had to completely immerse himself in a persona for the theater, rather than just being himself, which is different from a concert where the audience is expecting him to be himself. It called for self-control of a different kind, reliability, and discipline. He became the pivotal figure in that change in his role as Cabaret's MC during its revival. The figure is multifaceted, thought-provoking, and purposefully vague. He or she straddles the line between performance, individuality, and social critique. Not only was Lambert picked for the part, but it also mirrored themes he had experienced in his own career. Many of the difficulties Lambert had encountered since entering the public eye were reflected in the MC's world, which was constructed around freedom of speech, the conflict between uniqueness and social pressure, and the like. This change was all the more noticeable because of the accompanying visual and artistic alteration. Lambert shed the image that many people still linked with his early career for this role, introducing a totally new style. Lambert was still open to changing rather than clinging to a familiar identity, and this was shown through the character's theatrical makeup, hair, and overall presentation. Those who had been watching him since American Idol couldn't help but notice the difference. Lambert was very forthright about the personal significance of the Cabaret story to him. He said it was a story about the peril of having one's freedom and identity stripped away under particular situations. As an out-gay artist who had to navigate a business that was not always accepting, those themes resonated deeply with him. He was delving into concepts that had influenced his own life when he assumed that role, rather than merely playing a part. A subtle change within and a fresh beginning to come. Even though Adam Lambert's career was constantly changing in front of everyone's eyes, one of the biggest transformations in his life was happening behind the scenes. He secretly broke his romance with Oliver Glees after more than 4 years of dating. No one tried to make a big deal out of the split, there was no public outcry, and no dramatic remarks were made. Reportedly, the couple's relationship just came to an end. This chapter finished in a very different way for an artist whose early career was influenced by rigorous public scrutiny. It was evidence of his ability to exert control over his private life, something he had struggled with in the past. When Lambert was juggling his many responsibilities as a musician, tour manager, and performer, the partnership had a rock-solid foundation. Their relationship, which Lambert had publicly highlighted in interviews, was based on open communication, and Gleisa, who worked in the fashion sector, was frequently seen supporting him at events and exhibits. Their silent estrangement was all the more telling because of that basis. It stayed a private transformation, keeping Lambert free from the kind of outside pressure that had characterized earlier parts of his career, rather than becoming a controversy. Meanwhile, he was refocusing his professional efforts. Lambert turned his focus back to his solo work while Queen took a hiatus after their massive world tour. Without going into detail, he verified that fresh material was already under development and described it as going in a completely different path. This marked the start of a new chapter in his career, one where his creative choices, rather than teamwork, would play a larger role. He was getting ready to re-establish his own voice in a new way after years of juggling being a solo artist and vocalist for one of the most renowned bands in rock. Lambert didn't stop at music, he also got into the theater, where he played a crucial role that cemented his relationship to the stage. This wasn't a break from his career for him, rather, it was a return to an old aspect of it. He often says that his early lessons in standing up for himself and challenging himself to grow came from his time in the theater. His recent work reflects that frame of mind, which informed his performance and creative process. Meanwhile, his primary responsibility in all that he did was that of an advocate. Lambert, who has lived through the struggles of being openly homosexual in a generally unsupportive profession, has continuously utilized his platform to rally behind LGBTQ+ causes and larger human rights movements. In addition to supporting groups that deal directly with marginalized areas, he has taken part in large-scale charity events and made contributions to campaigns centered on mental health and equality. These endeavors are an integral part of his work, rather than something apart from it. An approach to public awareness that serves a greater good than just amusement. Given Adam Lambert's history, which of his personas do you believe is most striking? The daring competitor, the divisive entertainer, or the accomplished artist he is now? If you enjoyed this story and would want to see more like it, please subscribe and leave a comment.